Welcome to the world of Lovecraft. Ha 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 ha. And we're loading. And we're loading. And Dagon, here we go. Dagon is a faithful, interactive adaptation of H.P. Lovecraft's work focused on story and atmosphere. You will not find difficult choices, action sequences, or inventory management here. And movement is limited to progressing through locations along with...
I am writing this under an appreciable mental strain, since by tonight I shall be no more.
During the game you'll encounter interactive elements. Some of them will allow you to continue your journey. Others reveal interesting facts about the original short story, its historical background, and the author. Some of the trivia is hidden. In order to find these secrets, focus your eyes and look for the elder sign. Okay, so I do that with right bump, I believe. Or right trigger. Or right bump.
Penniless, and at the end of my supply of the drug which alone makes life endurable, I can bear the torture no longer, and shall cast myself from this garret window into the squalid street below. Do not think from my slavery to morphine that I am a weakling or a degenerate. When you have read these hastily scrawled pages, you may guess, though never fully realize, why it is that I must have forgetfulness or death. It was in one of the most open and least frequented parts of the broad Pacific that the packet of which I was supercargo fell a victim to the German sea raider. The Great War was then at its very beginning, and the ocean forces of the Hun had not completely sunk to their later degradation, so that our vessel was made a legitimate prize, whilst we of her crew were treated with all the fairness and consideration due us as naval prisoners.
The Huns were critical Asian nomads who established a dominion in Europe and invaded the Roman Empire in the 5th century AD. They were known as brutal, deadly warriors and masters of quick raids who also developed powerful composite bows, lassos, and early siege weapons. During World War I, the British used the word Hun as a synonym for Germans, I didn't know that, in order to emphasize their brutality. However, the term originated when the German Emperor Wilhelm II gave a speech to his troops on the 27th of July 1900 before they embarked to China. Should you encounter the enemy, you will be defeated. No quarter will be given. Prisoners will not be taken. Whoever falls into your hands is fortified, or is forfeited. Just as 1,000 years ago, the Huns under the King Attila made a name for themselves, one that even today makes them seem mighty in history and legend. May the name German be affirmed by you in such a way in China that no Chinese will ever again dare to look cross-eyed at a German. The refusal to take prisoners was clear breach of the laws and customs of war adopted during the First Hague Convention in 1899. I don't know if I said that word correctly. You can read the Discover Trivia immediately or go back to them later in the main menu. Turn off displaying trivia if you find that feature distracting from the story. This can be changed any time. Okay. We'll see how it goes. We'll see how much trivia they're giving us. I do kind of enjoy trivia.
So liberal, indeed, was the discipline of our captors, that 5 days after we were taken, I managed to escape alone in a small boat with water and provisions for a good length of time. When I finally found myself adrift and free, I had but little idea of my surroundings.
Oh no.
Never a competent navigator, I could only guess vaguely by the sun and stars that I was somewhat south of the equator.
Is this no land?
Of the longitude, I knew nothing, and no island or coastline was in sight.
Not this far out, at least.
The weather kept fair, and for uncounted days I drifted aimlessly beneath the scorching sun, waiting either for some passing ship or to be cast on the shores of some habitable land.
I like this voice actor. Who's that? Maybe that was
But neither ship nor land appeared, and I began to despair in my solitude upon the heaving vastness of unbroken blue. The change happened whilst I slept. Its details I shall never know, for my slumber, though troubled and dream-infested,
gross land. Yeah.
When at last I awoke, it was to discover myself half sucked into a slimy expanse of hellish black mire, which extended about me in monotonous undulations as far as I could see.
What a great word, undulations.
And in which my boat lay grounded some distance away. Though one might well imagine that my first sensation would be of wonder at so prodigious and unexpected a transformation of scenery, I was in reality more horrified than astonished. For there was in the air, and in the rotting soil, a sinister quality which chilled me to the very core. The region was putrid with the carcasses of decaying fish, and of other, less describable things which I saw protruding from the nasty mud of the unending plain. Perhaps I should not hope to convey in mere words the unutterable hideousness that can dwell in absolute silence and barren immensity. There was nothing within hearing, and nothing in sight, save a vast reach of black slime. Yet the very completeness of the stillness and the homogeneity of the landscape oppressed me with a nauseating fear.
What a great line.
The sun was blazing down from a sky which seemed to me almost black in its cloudless cruelty, as though reflecting the inky marsh beneath my feet.
The origins of Dagon. Dagon seems to be inspired by Fishhead, a short novel by Irvin S. Cobb about unnatural affinities between a hybrid idiot and the strange fish of an isolated lake. Supernatural horror in literature, H.P. Lovecraft. And Lovecraft's dream about a strange island emerging from the ocean and him crawling in the ooze that covered its surface. I dreamed that the whole hideous crawl and can yet feel the ooze sucking me down. In defense of Dagon, H.P. Lovecraft. Lovecraft's interest in the topic stemmed from his aversion to fish and sea smells. In his own words, I have hated fish and feared the sea and everything connected with it since I was 2 years old. That's interesting. But I cannot recall what earlier experience gave me such profound and lasting aversion to the sea and seafood. The Dweller in the Darkness, Lovecraft, 1927, Donald Wandry. That is interesting. Ooh, I hate that noise.
As I crawled into the stranded boat, I realized that only one theory could explain my position. Through some unprecedented volcanic upheaval, a portion of the ocean floor must have been thrown to the surface, exposing regions for which innumerable millions of years had lain hidden under unfathomable watery depths. So great was the extent of the new land which had risen beneath me that I could not detect the faintest noise of the surging ocean, straining my ears as I might. Nor were there any seafowl to prey upon the dead things.
Yeah, that would freak me out. There's a bunch of dead, or not all of them are dead. But there's no birds to...
For several hours I sat thinking or brooding in the boat, which lay upon its side and afforded a slight shade as the sun moved across the heavens. As the day progressed, the ground lost some of its stickiness and seemed likely to dry sufficiently for traveling purposes in a short time. That night I slept but little, and the next day I made for myself a pack containing food and water, preparatory to an overland journey in search of the vanished sea and possible rescue. On the third morning, I found the soil dry enough to walk upon with ease. The odor of the fish was maddening, but I was too much concerned with graver things to mind so slight an evil, and set out boldly for an unknown goal. All day I forged steadily westward, guided by a faraway hummock which...
Oops, sorry. I didn't know I could skip. God, what are these things? Some familiar, some unfamiliar. It makes it just creepy enough.
That night, I encamped, and on the following day still travelled toward the hummock, though that object seemed scarcely nearer than when I had first espied it. By the fourth evening, I attained the base of the mound, which turned out to be much higher than it had appeared from a distance. An intervening valley setting it out in sharper relief from the general surface. Too weary to ascend, I slept in the shadow of the hill. I know not why my dreams were so wild that night. But ere the waning and fantastically gibbous moon had risen far above the eastern plain, I was awake in a cold perspiration, determined to sleep no more. Such visions as I had experienced were too much for me to endure again. And in the glow of the moon I saw how unwise I had been to travel by day. Without the glare of the parching sun, my journey would have cost me less energy. Indeed, I now felt quite able to perform the ascent which had deterred me at sunset. Picking up my pack, I started for the crest of the eminence. I have said that the unbroken monotony of the rolling plain was a source of vague horror to me. But I think my horror was greater when I gained the summit of the mound and looked down the other side into an immeasurable pit or canyon, whose black recesses the moon had not yet soared high enough to illumine.
Oh no.
I felt myself on the edge of the world, peering over the rim into a fathomless chaos of eternal night. Through my terror ran curious reminiscences of Paradise Lost, and of Satan's hideous climb through the unfashioned realms of darkness. As the moon climbed higher in the sky, I began to see that the slopes of the valley were not quite so perpendicular as I had imagined. Ledges and outcroppings of rock afforded fairly easy footholds for a descent, whilst after a drop of only a few hundred feet, the declivity became very gradual. Urged on by an impulse which I cannot definitely analyze, I scrambled with difficulty down the rocks and stood on the gentler slope beneath, gazing into the Stygian deeps, where no light had yet penetrated. All at once, my attention was captured by a vast and singular object on the opposite slope, which rose steeply about 100 yards ahead of me, an object that gleamed whitely in the newly bestowed rays of the ascending moon.
What? Oh, okay.
That it was merely a gigantic piece of stone, I soon assured myself.
Oh, okay, sure.
But I was conscious of a distinct impression that its contour and position were not altogether the work of nature. A closer scrutiny filled me with sensations I cannot express.
God, it's so dark.
For despite its enormous magnitude, and its position in an abyss which had yawned at the bottom of the sea since the world was young, I perceived beyond a doubt that the strange object was a well-shaped monolith,
As I said.
whose massive bulk had known the workmanship and perhaps the worship of living and thinking creatures. Dazed and frightened, yet not without a certain thrill of the scientist's or archaeologist's delight, I examined my surroundings more closely.
That's the only one. Oh,
The moon, now
No.
near the zenith, shone weirdly and vividly above the towering
Oh.
steeps that hemmed in the chasm, and revealed the fact that a far-flung body of water flowed at the bottom, winding out of sight in both directions and almost lapping my feet as I stood on the slope. Across the chasm, the wavelets washed the base of the cyclopean monolith, on whose surface I could now trace both inscriptions and crude sculptures.
the atmosphere. is
The
really
writing was in a
scary.
system of hieroglyphics
Ooh, I see a
unknown
picture
to
of
me,
Cthulhu.
and unlike anything I'd ever seen in books. Consisting for the most part of conventionalized aquatic symbols such as fishes, eels, octopi, crustaceans, mollusks, whales, and the like. Several characters obviously represented marine things which are unknown to the modern world, but whose decomposing forms I had observed on the ocean-risen plain. It was the pictorial carving, however, that did most to hold me spellbound.
Ooh, Cthulhu. Storytelling methods. Dagon contained many themes and storytelling methods that Lovecraft developed in his later works, such as telling the story through carvings at the Mountains of Madness, the name of the city, journals and characters' notes, the shadow of time, the hunter of the dark, islands emerging from the ocean, the call of Cthulhu, or fictional beings and deities based on real events and mythologies. Migo in The Whisper in Darkness. It's also considered the origin of the popular Cthulhu Mythos. I didn't know that. Huh. Some of Lovecraft's other stories also conclude in a manner similar to Dagon. But let's skip the details in order not to spoil the ending. Good on you, game.
Plainly visible across the intervening water on account of their enormous size were an array of bas-reliefs whose subjects would have excited the envy of a doré.
That's a word I actually do not know. I'm gonna look that up. Doré. Can refer to a few things, most commonly the French word for golden. I don't speak French, so that's probably why I did not know it. Doré, interesting.
I think that these things were supposed to depict men, at least a certain sort of men, though the creatures were shown disporting like fishes in the waters
They're
of
the
some
ones that
marine
protected
grotto,
Cthulhu. Waters of some marine grotto.
or paying homage at some monolithic shrine which appeared to be under the waves as well. Of their faces
those
and
creatures
forms I dare not speak in
protect
detail,
Cthulhu from like us and the other things.
for the mere remembrance makes me grow faint, grotesque beyond the imagination of a Poe or a Bulwer. They were damnably human in general outline, despite webbed hands and feet, shockingly wide and flabby lips, glassy, bulging eyes, and other features less pleasant to recall. Curiously enough, they seem to have been chiseled badly out of proportion with their scenic background. For one of the creatures was shown in the act of killing a whale, represented as but little larger than himself. I remarked, as I say, their grotesqueness and strange size, but in a moment decided that they were merely the imaginary gods of some primitive fishing or seafaring tribe. Some tribe whose last descendant had perished eras before the first ancestor of the Piltdown or Neanderthal man was born.
Wait, so is Dagon supposed
Awestruck
to be
at this
one of the
unexpected
creatures
glimpse
that
into a past beyond the conception of the most daring anthropologist,
I don't think I understood that.
I stood musing whilst the moon cast queer reflections on the silent channel before me. Then, suddenly, I saw it.
I don't want to see it.
With only a slight churning to mark its rise to the surface, the thing slid into view above the dark waters.
Oh my god, it came out so much
It
faster
darted
than
like
I
a
thought.
stupendous monster of nightmares to the monolith, about which it flung its gigantic scaly arms, the while it bowed its hideous head and gave vent to certain measured sounds. I think I went mad then. Of my frantic ascent of the sloping cliff, and of my delirious journey back to the stranded boat, I remember little.
The way he popped out of the water so
I believe
fast
I
doesn't
sang a great deal
bode well.
and laughed oddly when I was unable to sing. I have indistinct recollections of a great storm sometime after I reached the boat. At any rate, I know that I heard pearls of thunder and other tones which nature utters only in her wildest moods.
Okay.
When I came out of the shadows, I was in a San Francisco hospital, brought thither by the captain of the American ship which had picked up my boat in mid-ocean. In my delirium, I had said much, but found that my words had been given scant attention. Of any land upheaval in the Pacific, my rescuers knew nothing. Nor did I deem it necessary to insist upon a thing which I knew they could not believe.
This is what makes him such a great author. Because everybody is scared of the unknown. You know? Lovecraft was a prominent figure in the world of amateur journalism. In 1915, he started publishing his own journal called The Conservative, which included political and social commentary, poetry, short stories, and literary criticism written by him and other authors. Wow. I don't remember what year he was born, so I don't know how old he was when that was. But Howard was a skilled wordsmith, but he also took criticism to heart, which resulted in his decision to step away from writing and poetry and concentrate on weird fiction again. For the first time since his teenage years, Dagon, published in 1919, is one of the short stories written during that period. In this example excerpt from The Conservative, the master of horror fiction explains his attitude towards warfare and the idea of world peace. Why any... Something just knocked in my actual place. Okay. Why any sane human being can believe in the possibility of universal peace is more than the conservative can fathom. Should the entire civilized world agree simultaneously to disarm one or more nations would undoubtedly retain secret armaments the same exact thing. No country is or ever can be above warfare until the basic impulses of the human animal shall have miraculously changed. I wholeheartedly believe the same idea. And whatever your political belief, I believe that's exactly why Donald Trump just wanted to now start doing nuclear testing, because Russia and China are doing it. So it's like the same thing. We kind of have to show that, like, oh, well, we can do the same thing that you two are doing, just so you know. Because if you let other people do things like that and get away with it, they're going to take advantage.
Once I sought out a celebrated ethnologist and amused him with peculiar questions regarding the ancient Philistine legend of Dagon, the fish god.
Yeah, this is Dagon, or Dagon, was the main deity of the Philistines, worshipped throughout the Middle East as an ancient god of fertility and crops. Is that true? I did not know that. I thought he made that up. In Hebrew, the word Dagon was a common noun for grain. The rulers of Akkad, Mesopotamia, chose him as the patron saint of their war conquest. So, it says he's a deity of the Philistines, but doesn't that mean he's an Akkadian god? Am I messing that up? Chosen as patron saint of war conquest. He also appeared as the judge of the dead in the Assyrian poem under the underworld prison order in one of the Babylonian texts. In the Assyrian poem, is there only one? He is often mistakenly taken for a fish god due to the wrong interpretation of his name, as in Hebrew the word dag means fish. In H.P. Lovecraft's work, Dagon is an underwater deity ruling over the deep ones, a humanoid race with fish traits that resides in the oceans. He is worshipped by a secret cult called the Esoteric Order of Dagon. So the deep ones, that's the name of the people that guard Cthulhu, I believe. So Dagon is one of them. I did not know that. And I've read this short story.
But soon perceiving that he was hopelessly conventional, I did not press my inquiries.
Yeah, definitely look at the Necronomicon. August Derleth, I believe is what he said, was an American writer and anthologist. He also befriended Lovecraft and published many of his works through his company, Arkham House. Oh, okay. Although he greatly contributed to the... one second. Excuse me. Although he greatly contributed to the popularization of the author's work after his death, he is surrounded by numerous controversies. One of his most questionable decisions involved introducing the good versus evil doctrine. Derleth was a devout Catholic, to the Cthulu Mythos, which contrasted with Lovecraft's view of the world and his approach to cosmic horror. As a result, the author's works are often misunderstood and misrepresented in today's culture. It is also worth noting that Lovecraft was really never interested in creating a mythology, and the term Cthulu Mythos was coined by Derleth after the author left the mortal plane. Another thing I never knew. These are really good trivia questions, or just good trivia knowledge, I should say. Oh, there we go, the clock. Shouldn't I be... clock then. Strange.
It is at night, especially when the moon is gibbous and waning, that I see the thing. I tried morphine, but the drug has given only transient surcease and has drawn me into its clutches as a hopeless slave. So now I am to end it all, having written a full account for the information or the contemptuous amusement of my fellow men. Often, I ask myself if it could not all have been a pure phantasm. A mere freak of fever as I lay sun-stricken and raving in the open boat after my escape from the German man-of-war. This I ask myself, but ever does there come before me a hideously vivid vision in reply. I cannot think of the deep sea without shuddering at the nameless things that may at this very moment be crawling and floundering on its slimy bed, worshipping their ancient stone idols and carving their own detestable likenesses on submarine obelisks of water-soaked granite. I dream of a day when they may rise above the billows to drag down into their reeking talons the remnants of puny, war-exhausted mankind. Of a day when the land shall sink and the dark ocean shall ascend amidst universal pandemonium. The end is near.
Oh, Lord.
I hear a noise at the door, as of some immense slippery body lumbering against it. It shall not find me. God, that hand! The window! The window!
Thank you for playing. We hope you enjoyed immersing yourself in our little pool of cosmic horror. We would appreciate it if you took a moment to rate Dagon and check out the other games in the DLC. Interesting. I'm gonna have to look at those. I'll leave feedback. Dagon. How do I do that? The controller's getting a moment. Post a review. Yeah, recommended. Okay. Well, hey guys, that was pretty fun. It was kind of cool to play a game where you're just like playing through a story, and it's a short story too. Don't make any of these on Stephen King's work though, please. But this one, pretty good. I enjoyed it.
And scary stories have been accompanying men for centuries.
That scared me.
They have many faces and forms. But what is their purpose? Why do we enjoy being afraid so much? During our therapy, I'll try to
Oh my gosh. Hungry for more? Follow and wish list are collection of horror stories. Interesting. Wait, what? You can unlock all trivia in this category, but you won't get the little glass bottle, the railway horror. There was this many things that I missed. Volcanic eruptions sometimes result in the creation of islands. Most of them are transient and erode after some time, but some prove permanent. A floating pumice porous rock created when superheated pressurized rock is ejected from a volcano can move across long distances and transport barnacle and macroalgae that cling to it. In 2001, rafts of pumice created during the eruption of a volcano near Tonga, Polynesia, eventually reached Australia. Whoa! That's wild. The creator of the Cthulu Mythos and the fictional underwater city of, I never knew how to pronounce this, Rayleigh, was convinced that life could not exist at the bottom of the ocean because the water pressure would make it uninhabitable. Today we know that the darkest depths of the ocean are home to many peculiar organisms. The deepest dwelling fish we have discovered so far, the Mariana snailfish, can live about 8,000 meters, more than 26,000 feet below the ocean's surface, in never-ending darkness and at hellishly crushing pressures, hundreds of times stronger than those found at sea level. Upon glancing at the modern photos of deep-sea creatures such as the anglerfish, the fang-tooth, or the viperfish, and their truly Lovecraftian characteristics, yeah, that's actually true, it's hard not to find some irony in this. I never realized that, like, you know, the anglerfish, viperfish, those things weren't around when he wrote this. It's pretty interesting. Contrary to popular opinion, Lovecraft was not an ever-frowning, eccentric, grumpy loner. He considered himself to be a person who appreciated humor. Moreover, he would often meet with friends in his apartment or at various cafes in Brooklyn and Manhattan. At times, his social life was so intensive, his work would suffer for months. This is news to me. There was a point when he finally decided he needed to put an end to daily meetings and loitering in New York cafeterias and resorted to hiding at home and reading with the main room light turned off, pretending he wasn't there whenever a friend knocked at his door. Oh my God, I'm turning into Lovecraft. I just stay home and write my scripts and don't go out. He also had another method of deterring his guests, which involved greeting them in a bathrobe with an unmade bed visible in the background and piles of paper scattered across the floor. Let me tell you something. That doesn't work anymore. People will still come right into your home. They don't care. The Piltdown Man. Lovecraft would often use the latest scientific discoveries as inspiration for his works. He would even update his stories at the last moment in order to make sure they reflected the latest breakthroughs. Unfortunately, this method was not without its flaws. After Lovecraft's death, the Piltdown Man discovery mentioned in Dagon turned out to be a paleoanthropologic fraud. In 1912, Charles Dawson, an amateur archaeologist, announced that he had discovered the missing link between ape and man, the fossilized remains of a previously unknown early human. Years later, that turned out to be forgery. But by that point, the fraud had already managed to negatively affect the early research on human evolution discovery took place, the majority of the scientific community believed Dawson indeed found the missing link. In 1953, Time magazine published evidence proving that Dawson was a con man. It turned out that the fossils of previously unknown earthly human consisted of a human skull, the jaw of an orangutan, and chimpanzee teeth. It's crazy to hear all that because you think just by looking at it, a modern person would be like, no. What is that? You just put that together. Yeah, okay. Lovecraft was... I'm getting tongue-tied. I need a drink. Lovecraft considered himself an atheist and absolute materialist, which he attributed partly to his early childhood interest in astronomy and science in general. In his own words, I am indeed an absolute materialist so far as actual belief goes, with not a shred of credence in any form of supernaturalism, religion, spiritualism, transcendentalism, metapsychosis, or immortality. That word got jumbled in my head for some reason. All I say is that I think it is damn unlikely that anything like a central cosmic will, a spirit world, or an eternal survival of personality exists. They are more preposterous and unjustified of all the guesses which can be made about the universe, and I am not enough of a hair splitter to pretend that I don't regard them as errant and negligible moonshine. In theory, I am an agnostic, but pretending the appearance of radical evidence, I must be classed practically and provisionally as an atheist. Interesting. In defense of Dagon. In 1921, Lovecraft released a series of 3 essays. The defense reopens, the defense remains open, and final words. Later published as a collection titled In Defense of Dagon, in which he rebukes a series of criticisms directed at his works. Some notable quotes. I paint what I dream, and will let the public settle the rest amongst themselves. I like that. Mr. Monday asks the raison d'etre of Dagon, I will give it. Purely and simply to reproduce a mood. Its object is the simplest in all art, portrayal. The physical horrors of war, no matter how extreme and unprecedented, hardly have a bearing on the entirely different realm of supernatural terror. Ghosts are still ghosts. The mind can get more thrills from unrealities than from realities. In the essays, Lovecraft touches upon the topics of atheism, materialism, the quest for truth, and the love of science. The Marketer? Lovecraft's attempts to find a job in 1925 were influenced by advice he received from friends. Among others, he started freelancing for a marketing magazine where he would write announcements and commercials. Feel free to judge this copywriting skill for yourself. From an ad for Curtis Woodwork. Curtis Woodwork embraces both the unusual structural units and the cleverest contrivances of built-in or permanent furniture, such as bookcases, dressers, buffets, and cupboards. Every model is conceived and crafted with the purest art, ripest scholarship, and mellowest craftsmanship, which energetic enterprise can command, and made to conform rigidly to the architecture of each particular type of home. The cost, considering the quality, is amazingly low, and a trademark on the individual piece prevents any substitution by careless contractors. Source: Lovecraft Study, Volume 7, Number 1, H.P. Lovecraft, S.T. Joshi. I need to do something about my screen brightness because some words are hard to see. Okay. These days, the word scientist is a widely accepted term. But at the time Dagon was published, it was subject to a wide debate. Are you kidding me? After the author used in the story, critics pointed out that the man of science was a more appropriate term to employ. He admitted in the defense of Dagon that if Dagon were to be reprinted, he would indeed use the phrase they suggested. Scientist was considered as an analog to artist, to be used when referring to those studying different branches of science. Yet in the 19th and early 20th century, scientific researchers in Great Britain and the United States were of the opinion that man of science, resembling the term man on letters, was the only proper choice. Among other things, it was gender specific, indicating that science was an endeavor to be pursued by only one sex. The term scientist became more accepted only after World War II, and man of science started fading into obscurity as an old-fashioned synonym. Lovecraft hated tobacco. Well, here's where we disagree. We somewhat disagree on atheism, although I go back and forth with religion myself, mostly on the not believing side, but that's me and my own personal dilemmas. But tobacco, I absolutely love. I wish I still smoked cigarettes. I think about them all the time. And pipes and cigars just don't do it like this nice cigarette does. But okay. Lovecraft hated tobacco, even though he used to smoke when he was 12 in order to look and feel like an adult. In his correspondence with friend Reinhard Kleiner, he claims that he quit as soon as he started wearing long pants. Okay? He also had a very strong opinion about alcohol, as evidenced by his letter to Zelia Brown, dated 13th February 1928. As for the matter of drinking, I've never tasted intoxicating liquor and never intend to. Having a strong aesthetic disgust at anything which blunts or coarses the delicate natural equipoise of the evolved human intellect and imagination. That's an interesting line, because some would say that alcohol could heighten the imagination. For example, Van Gogh's paintings when he was drunk on absinthe. Drinking excited my personal repugnance, hence I don't drink. Let the herd do what they will. He says some crazy things. I am rather in favor of prohibition, the prohibition of any one antisocial force as well as of another. What an interesting man. Elder sign. At another house where people were stirring, he asked questions about the gods and whether they danced often upon Lyrium. But the farmer and his wife would only make the elder sign and tell him the way to Nir and Ulthar, the dream quest of unknown Kadith. H.P. Lovecraft. Elder sign is a protective symbol that can be found in various works of pop culture, usually represented by a 5-pointed star with an eye flame symbol in its center. For example, in games inspired by H.P. Lovecraft's writings, it's supposed to ward away all kinds of cosmic horror. However, this is a later version of the sign, created by the author's friend, writer August Derleth. In our game, we have used the original symbol as designed by Lovecraft, in the form of a 6-pointed branch, which he sometimes included in letters to his friends. That's interesting. That makes me think that Mr. August Derleth may have been an occultist. A 5-pointed star with a flaming eye. That sounds occultish to me. So yeah, that was a cool game. Interesting. Definitely interesting. And I will see you all next time. I still don't know how to end these things. Goodbye.